Hello again and welcome to a section which is mostly scraps of videos from whatever I could find. And this is a piece of footage of me blabbering and demonstrating regarding how to control early rust exposure and how to respray the whole unit. But all that footage is now lost. So moving on to installing the fuel delivery system. These are the fuel tank straps that are used to hold down the fuel tank in position. However, these straps cannot have a metal-to-metal contact, so a special foam was placed in between. This type of foam is fireproof as seen in this demonstration, where the foam just breaks down when exposed to fire and just disintegrates. Now in reality, if ever there's a fire, it will immediately become uncontrollable, since there's the upholstery, but in this case, this was just a minor prevention. And once the foam was cut to size, it was held in position with some spray adhesive. Now a new fuel sender was installed for more accurate readings, because the old one was only reading from 1/4 up to 3/4. Also, the tank's non-return valve was installed and placed the tank back in position. With the tank put in place and secured, we can take a look at the fuel hoses. The main footer hose was changed because the rubber has become hard and could have cracked, so I was not going to take chances and I had it replaced. Also, the biggest issue was the replacement of the breather pipe, which was replaced with a steel reinforced fuel hose. So if any vacuum was created in the pipe, this time it will not cave in like what had happened to the original breather hose. Also, the water drain hose was replaced and properly positioned. Now while tackling the underneath of the car, again all the footage with the minor modifications regarding the fuel system was lost, but at least we get to see how the fuel delivery system was installed, starting off by installing the new internal tank mesh. The route of which the fuel flows starts from the fuel tank to the pre-filter, which is there to safeguard the fuel pump, and then from the fuel pump it is passed through the fine filter, which will be directed all the way to the fuel injector common rails. Now when checking through the manual book, apparently it had a fuel pump guard, but the car had this guard missing. Luckily a fellow Biturbo owner let me dismantle his fuel guard for me to copy it, and came up with this piece. Now this is not my work, I gave it to a sheet metal company who produced a stainless steel copy in relation to the original aluminium piece. In addition, the plate has been fitted with some rubber to dampen the vibrating effect produced from the fuel pump when in contact with the plate. So with everything put in place, what you see here is the final setup of the fuel delivery system. In this section of the assembly, what we have is a mix and match of necessary parts required to be assembled prior to the reintroduction of the engine and differential back in the car. To start off, here's the pedal box temporarily assembled from the small parts to the gasket that seals the unit, so as to test it before actually installing it in the car. Now here you see me blabbering about changing the brake vacuum servo or brake booster because I got concerned with past braking issues. I also changed the brake master cylinder because when I opened the unit to measure and visually inspect it, I found that the seals have reached their service life limit. Also, the bore was pitted due to gradual wear over the years. So with that I took no risks when it came to brakes and changed the steel brake pipes, rubber hoses and fully rebuilt the brake calipers. With the pedal box in place, the assembled brake servo was installed, followed by the clutch master cylinder. Having a look from the inside of the car, the steering bracket was installed along with the steering bush and steering rack bellow. So with everything in order, the pedals were properly installed along with the returning springs and rubber cushioning. Now the tricky part was this piece, which is the heat shield that sits on the firewall. Here you see the original one, which has gathered enough water and mold to be used as fertilizer. So I tried to buy me a new one, but the new old stock I have found was all cracked due to age, so I went for a custom built one, which I tailored myself. Now to start off, I made a template which I placed on the body and cut it out accordingly to what I deemed fit. The material I've used was a reflective heat shield, which can be easily bought by the meter. This material is one part fiber mesh and the other part made out of an aluminium foil bonded as one. Also, the original material tends to absorb moisture, which in turn keeps the temperature inside the engine bay quite high. So what I'm trying to do is trying to help this very busy engine bay breathe a bit better by decreasing the amount of clutter. After all this work, the heat shield I made still turned out cheaper at around a quarter of the price, because the factory shield one costed at around €300. The loose cutouts were sealed using high temperature sealant. My main concern in all this was the fact that the material had to be fireproof, and the original unit was not. Here is my custom-made firewall heat shield. Now this is tailor-made for this car. I also added some bits and pieces over here. This will improve the overall dissipation of the heat, so it will not transfer onto the other side where the passenger is, nor will the material itself absorb all the heat. What I have now is the final version of it. Mainly what I did was I cut out and stenciled it properly. I adjusted some of these parts to fit perfectly. I also sealed these edges over here for it to blend in with the silver and the grey. I cut out these parts over here and here for a better shielding, and also I extended some pieces over here and sealed the underneath. Now this is all done to protect the car from excessive heat due to the close range of the manifold, which sits right over here, onto the exhaust pipes, which are very close to the body panels and the undercarriage. Now since this car is a very low car, it requires a lot of shielding. I will also shield the pipes themselves with some insulating tape for it to shield even further the heat coming out from the exhaust pipe onto the panels. And now I'll show you at a close range what I did so far on this piece. Now this is the steel brake line which was replaced with a new one, because the old one had kinks in some of the bends, which overall would limit the amount of pressure in the pipe. The steel fuel lines were also replaced due to being heavily pitted, which surfaced while I was cleaning them, so for safety reasons I did not want to jeopardize the car by potentially having leaking fuel lines. The bonnet locks, cables and reservoirs have been installed in their place. However, before installing the brake bottle, I had to clean the brake reservoir. Now a funny story I encountered was when I wanted to buy a brake bottle instead of cleaning the old one, in order to save time. So when I contacted the Maserati company, they charged me €600 just for the bottle. So I opted for cleaning it, although I found it a bit strange that an original master cylinder costed less than the bottle, at around €350. This cleaning method is very simple, but it takes some time. Now keep in mind that the bottle has 3 compartments, and 2 of them are impossible to get to. However, with these simple ingredients, it is possible. The ingredients are baking soda, white vinegar, and an oversaturated amount of table salt. Firstly, the residue is to be weakened with a baking soda and vinegar mix, and let it set. After being left overnight, the bottle is filled to the brim with table salt and poured with a mix of warm water with vinegar. When mixed, most of the water will dissolve in the liquid until saturated, and the trick lies with the remaining salt in the bottle. Now all the holes are to be sealed off and the bottle shaken vigorously. By doing so, the salt will brush off the black residue. When all is cleaned, the bottle is then just rinsed off with warm water to dissolve the remaining salt, and the bottle dried out. With the bottle cleaned, the rest of the piping was installed. Next was the installation of the headlight backplates. With all the equipment installed, the pedals were assembled and properly set. The final piece of the puzzle before assembling the front and rear subframes is the installation of the handbrake. And so, with all these parts in place, it's time to put the power plant back in the body. So until then, thanks for watching.